The first scream came from behind curtain 3, sharp enough to cut through the overnight quiet of Mercy County General and make every head in the emergency department snap in the same direction. Then the heart monitor went flat. Not dipped, not stuttered, flat. Dr. Leah Mercer was already moving before the nurse shouted, "He's crashing," already stripping on gloves as she hit the gap in the curtain with her shoulder. The room smelled like antiseptic, sweat, and the metallic edge of fresh blood. A teenage boy lay half off the gurney, his gown twisted around his hips, one hand hanging limp, fingers blue-white under fluorescent light. His mother was pressed against the wall with both hands over her mouth, making a sound Leah would hear later in her sleep and mistake for an animal caught in wire. "What happened?" Leah barked. "He seized, then dropped," a resident said, voice too high, too fast. "Possible overdose, maybe head trauma, we were still move." Leah planted both palms on the boy's sternum and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The cartwheels rattled. Someone tore open a package behind her. Someone else was crying. No, not someone. The mother. "Baby, baby, baby, stay with me." Leah's arms locked into rhythm. She could feel the cartilage strain under her weight. She could feel every set of eyes in the room waiting for her to turn force into miracle. Push epi. Pushing. Airway. Tubes in. Good chest rise. Good chest rise. Leah counted under her breath, then louder, then stopped because counting made it feel orderly, and nothing about the room was orderly. Blood had dried in a crescent under the boy's nostril. There was dirt on his sneakers, red clay packed into the grooves. Outside the curtain, a trauma pager started screaming again. Another incoming disaster. Another body on the way. Mercy County sat off Route 9 between a shuttered furniture mill and a chain grocery store with a parking lot full of potholes. On a Friday night, it collected every fracture, overdose, panic attack, bar fight, and highway collision from 3 counties. Tonight, the air itself seemed overworked. "Come on," Leah muttered. Not to the room, not even to the boy. To her own hands. To the impossible thin line between almost gone and not yet. "Come on." The monitor jumped. Everybody froze. Then nothing. Flat again. Resume. She drove down harder. Sweat slid down her spine under her scrub top. Her ponytail had come half loose. She could hear the automatic doors from the ambulance bay opening and closing, a mechanical inhale-exhale at the far end of the hall. She knew without looking that the waiting room television would still be playing some late local news package about county commissioner fraud. She knew the vending machine outside radiology had been broken for 2 weeks, and maintenance kept putting the same handwritten out-of-order note back on it like prayer. She knew because this place repeated itself until you started to think your life had been stapled to it. Pulse check. Everyone stopped. Silence expanded so suddenly, it rang. Leah pressed 2 fingers to the carotid. Nothing. She looked at the clock. Too long. Too damn long. The mother took 1 step forward, as if she could read the answer in Leah's face before Leah said it. Leah did not say it. Not yet. She listened to the room breathing. She listened to the resident shifting from foot to foot. She listened to the hiss of oxygen. The boy's lashes were wet. He looked 14, maybe 15. He had acne along his jaw and a bruise blooming near his temple. He looked like somebody who had left a backpack on a school bus and sprinted after it. He looked like he should have had years left to waste. "1 more round," Leah said. A nurse glanced at the clock. Leah saw it and hated her for it, then hated herself. "Doctor, 1 more round." Nobody argued after that. They knew better. Or maybe they just knew her. 10 compressions in, the trauma doors burst open down the hall, and a voice shouted, "GSW, male, 50s, hypotensive, gunshot wound, another life rolling in on bad timing. Mercy County's specialty." Leah kept going. On the 15th compression, the boy's mother said, very quietly, "Please don't stop because I wasn't here when it started." Leah's hands faltered for half a beat, not enough for anyone else to see, more than enough for her to feel. Something old and ugly shifted in her chest, the same deep-buried thing that woke with her at 4 in the morning and lay there grinning in the dark. She finished the cycle. Pulse check. Nothing. She stared at the flat green line and finally heard her own voice from somewhere above her body. Time of death, 11:43 p.m. The mother folded in half as if her spine had been unhooked. The resident looked down. The nurse reached for the monitor to silence it. Leah stepped back and peeled off her gloves. Her fingers were shaking. It happened sometimes after a code, the body discharging what the mind wouldn't let through. She pulled the curtain open and walked straight into the chaos of the hallway, straight into the smell of rain blowing in from the ambulance bay and coffee burnt to sludge on the nurse's station warmer. The gunshot patient was coming past now, A heavy-set man with gray at his temples and blood soaking through layered bath towels somebody had pressed against his abdomen in the field. His face was waxy, his lips moved around some private sentence. A sheriff's deputy jogged beside the gurney, hand on his belt, hat gone, shirt damp at the collar. Found him in his truck out by Miller Road, the deputy said. Says he knows who did it. Leah looked once at the patient's face, and the floor slipped. Not metaphorically. Her knees nearly gave. She put a hand on the wall and felt cinderblock through chipped paint. The man on the gurney was Owen Mercer, her husband. Not separated, not estranged. Husband, still wearing his wedding ring, smeared with blood. His eyes found hers for half a second. Enough to show that he recognized her. Enough to show fear so naked it made him look younger than 52, younger than the county prosecutor who had spent 20 years putting people away with a voice like cut stone. "Leah," he said, and blood bubbled pink at the corner of his mouth. Everything in the hall kept moving. The wheels kept rattling. The deputy kept talking. Somebody in triage was arguing about insurance. A child was coughing in the waiting room. But for Leah, the world narrowed to the exact shape of her husband's face and the fact that 6 minutes earlier she had been trying and failing to drag a stranger's son back from the dark, and now the dark had come to collect from her. "Or 2 is still tied up," a charge nurse shouted. "We stabilize here." Leah straightened. Training rose like muscle memory over shock, not canceling it, just strapping it down. Trauma Bay 1. Massive transfusion now. Call surgical backup. Get ultrasound in here. Dr. Mercer now. The staff obeyed, because her voice had changed into the one people followed. She walked alongside the gurney, not touching Owen yet. If she touched him, this became personal. If it became personal, she lost the last clean inch of ground she was standing on. The trauma bay lights were brutal. All truth and no mercy. Monitors blinked awake. Plastic crinkled. The respiratory therapist cut away Owen's shirt, exposing a soft older man's torso gone slick with blood. Entry wound right lower quadrant. No obvious exit. Leah's mind started sorting data with pitiless efficiency. Pressure dropping, skin cool, distended abdomen, internal bleed. "Sir, stay with me," a nurse said. Owen turned his head toward Leah instead. "Don't let them call Noah, their son, 22. 3 states away at graduate school in Chicago, angry at both of them in the ordinary exhausted way. Young men can be angry when they think their parents built a life out of compromise and silence." Leah looked at Owen hard. "Who shot you?" He shut his eyes for a second, opened them again. "Don't, Owen." She leaned closer. "Who shot you?" The deputy hovered by the door, pretending to stay back while listening to every syllable. Owen's breath hitched. "I was going to tell you. Blood pressure alarm. Somebody announced numbers. Too low." Leah felt the room tipping again, but this time, not from shock. From something colder. She knew that tone, knew the shape of a confession trying to claw its way out at exactly the wrong time. The same tone Owen used when he admitted he'd forgotten an anniversary dinner, or signed a campaign donor letter he said he wouldn't sign, or promised he was only working late, when late had become a category with its own smell. "Tell me what," she said. A flash of movement at the door caught her eye. Deputy Carla Ruiz stepped in, rain on the shoulders of her tan uniform, dark hair escaping its tie, expression hard and focused. Leah had known Carla for years through hospital shootings, car wrecks, domestic calls, all the terrible civic overlap in a town this size. Carla looked from Leah to Owen, and something unreadable crossed her face. "We found a second victim," she said. "Female. Miller Road. Didn't make it." Leah barely heard the words. Owen did. He jerked against the restraints they'd buckled over his forearms. "No. Not pain. Recognition." Leah's head turned slowly toward Carla. "Who?" Carla hesitated one beat too long. "Dana Whitaker." The name landed like a strike to the sternum. Dana Whitaker, 38, development director for Owen's re-election committee last year, married once, divorced now, bright smile, expensive boots, the kind of woman who spoke to waitresses and donors in the exact same warm register and made both feel chosen. Leah had met her twice at campaign dinners, and once in their kitchen, where Dana had stood laughing by the fridge with one of Leah's wine glasses in her hand, while Owen explained they were just finalizing outreach numbers for the rural precincts. Just finalizing. Outreach. Numbers. Owen started to say something, but then his pressure dropped again and the room exploded into movement. Leah was shoved sideways by necessity. A unit of blood was slammed in. The surgeon on call came in, pulling on gloves, asking for a rapid summary. Leah gave it, clipped and precise, like the victim in question had not once slept beside her for 27 years. Ultrasound showed black around the liver. More blood where blood should not be. The surgeon looked at Leah once, took in the situation, and said, I need him upstairs now. Then take him, Leah said. Her voice sounded normal. That frightened her. Owen's hand lifted off the bed a few inches, reaching. Whether for her or for absolution, she couldn't tell. She did not take it. They rolled him toward the elevator. Carla stayed. The doors closed on the surgeon, the nurses, and Owen's face, pale under the fluorescent wash. The hall went abruptly quiet around Leah, as if the building had sucked in a breath and was waiting to see whether she would collapse. Carla moved closer. Leah, don't. Leah stared at the red line the gurney wheels had painted across the floor. Not paint. Blood. You knew? Carla's silence answered faster than words. Leah turned. How long? I didn't know exactly what it was. Carla's tone was careful. I knew your husband had been seen with Dana. More than once. Off the clock. Out on Miller Road tonight, a caller reported shots from near the old citrus packing lot. When we got there, both vehicles were still warm. Leah laughed once. A short, dead sound. Warm. Great. The hallway lights buzzed overhead. In room 7, a drunk was singing through his oxygen mask. Somewhere, a printer spat out labels. Mercy County never stopped being itself just because one person's life had split open. Carla lowered her voice. There's more. Of course there was. There was always more. Dana wasn't just campaign staff. Financial Crimes has been sniffing around Owen's redirected accounts. County settlement money that doesn't land where it should. Dana may have been cooperating. Leah looked at her as if she'd started speaking another language. Owen, bleeding out on her table. Dana, dead on Miller Road. Missing county money. The local news package in the waiting room suddenly sharpened in retrospect. Commissioner Fraud. Prosecutor's office whispers. She thought of every dinner Owen had eaten while scrolling his phone. Every midnight call taken on the porch. Every apology delivered with measured sincerity. You're telling me my husband was sleeping with a woman who may have been helping build a case against him, and now she's dead. Carla held her gaze. I'm telling you, this is going to get ugly before dawn. The automatic doors opened again and let in a gust of cold, wet air carrying gasoline, damp asphalt, and the fried grease smell from the all-night diner across the highway. Leah realized she was freezing. She also realized she still had the dead boy's blood under one fingernail. Her body did not know which grief to process first, so it processed neither. There's a reporter in the parking lot already, Carla said. Someone on County Dispatch leaked the shooting. Leah nodded once. Of course they did. Do you have somewhere you can go? That almost made Leah smile. Go where? Home, where Owen's slippers would still be by the bed and his reading glasses on the kitchen counter. To Noah, who would hear the truth about his father through social media if she didn't call fast enough. Into the supply closet until she could unzip her own skin and step out of it. I'm on shift, she said. Carla's jaw tightened. Leah, I'm on shift. Because if she stopped being Dr. Leah Mercer, attending physician, she became Leah Mercer, wife of a possibly corrupt prosecutor and fool of 27 years. And the second version might not remain standing. Carla studied her another second, then nodded in the resigned way cops do when they know they can't drag someone away from duty without making the damage worse. I'll keep you updated from the OR and the scene. She started to step back, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Leah said nothing. Carla left. The hallway widened and emptied around Leah until she felt absurdly visible. A woman in blood-flecked scrubs under bad hospital lights, suspended between a stranger's death and her husband's secrets. Then a voice snapped from triage. Dr. Mercer, we need you in room 5. Chest pain, possible STEMI. Life didn't wait for revelation. It shoved a chart into your hands and told you to keep moving. Leah inhaled once, deep enough to taste bleach and burnt coffee and rain, and turned toward room 5. On her way, she passed curtain 3. The mother inside was weeping softly now. The raw scream burned down to something smaller and somehow harder to bear. Leah slowed but did not step in. She had pronounced the boy dead and left his mother with the body. She had done it because there was always another emergency, always another person at the edge. Tonight, that edge had circled back and put its mouth on her own house. She reached room 5 and pushed inside. An older trucker sat on the bed, clutching his chest, his boots muddy, his face gray with fear. He looked up at her as if she might save him simply by arriving. For one terrible second, Leah envied him. His crisis was honest. It had one body, one heart, one visible source of pain. Tell me where it hurts, she said. And when he pointed to the center of his chest, she moved toward him with steady hands while, somewhere above her, an elevator climbed toward surgery, carrying the man who had built a second life in secret and might die before she got a single straight answer. The trucker's flannel shirt was damp under the arms, his thick fingers trembling where they gripped the blanket over his lap. He smelled like diesel, old coffee, and wet highway. His ball cap sat crushed beside him on the bed, the brim dark with rain. Leah snapped on fresh gloves and pressed the stethoscope to his chest. The room hummed with fluorescent light and the thin electric rattle of an old wall vent trying to keep up with the storm outside. "Scale of 1 to 10, she said. "How bad?" "9, maybe," he said, breathing shallow. "Started out on 68. Thought it was heartburn. Then my left arm went numb. Any history of cardiac issues?" "High blood pressure. My ex-wife says that counts as a whole personality." Under almost any other set of circumstances, Leah might have smiled politely. Tonight the joke passed her like traffic heard through sealed glass. She listened to the rhythm in his chest, watched the monitor numbers crawl, scanned the EKG the nurse held out. ST elevation, clear enough that even the half-asleep resident leaning at the doorway could see it. "He's going to cath," Leah said. "Activate it now." The nurse nodded and stepped out, already calling upstairs. Leah looked back at the patient. Fear had made his eyes glossy. He was older than he first looked, maybe 60, weathered by sun and miles. There was grease under one thumbnail. A plain gold wedding band hung loose on the chain around his neck instead of on his hand. "What's your name?" she asked. "Wayne." "Okay, Wayne, you're having a heart attack. We caught it. We're moving fast." He swallowed hard. "Am I gonna die?" The question should have been simple. Patients asked it all the time, directly or by circling around it with softer words. But tonight, the word die struck every exposed nerve in her body. The dead boy under curtain 3. Dana Whitaker on Miller Road. Owen under surgical lights with his abdomen open. Leah pulled the rolling stool closer and sat so she was level with Wayne's face. "Not if I can help it," she said. The answer sounded competent, clean, useful. It also sounded like a lie she had told too many times to too many people who desperately wanted to believe in professional certainty. Wayne nodded anyway, because patients did that when a white coat handed them a sentence sturdy enough to hold on to. As orderlies arrived with the transport bed, Leah stepped back, gave instructions, signed what needed signing, and watched them wheel him away. She stayed in room 5 after he was gone, one gloved hand braced on the counter, staring at the wrinkled paper on the mattress where his body had been. The room was suddenly full of ordinary leftovers, an alcohol wipe torn open and unused, the patient education pamphlet no one had touched, a pulse ox lead hanging off the side of the bed like a limp tail. The smallness of these objects made her furious. Her husband might be dying under a scalpel, and the world still produced disposable wrappers. The resident cleared his throat at the doorway. "Dr. Mercer?" She turned. It was Adam Feldman, second year, eager, too soft in the jaw to hide how young he was. He had the look of a man trying to decide whether kindness or professionalism was safer. "What?" He flinched almost invisibly. "Mrs. Alvarez in 8 needs reevaluation. And social work wants to know if you can speak to the family from the code when you have a minute." The code, as if there had only been one tonight. Leah pulled off her gloves, dropped them in the trash, and pinched the bridge of her nose until stars flickered behind her eyelids. She needed coffee, water, a wall to lean against. She needed to drive out to Miller Road and stand in the mud where Dana had died and ask the night itself what kind of idiot she had been. Instead, she said, "I'll see Mrs. Alvarez first." Adam hesitated. "Are you okay to keep going?" It was such a foolish question that it almost earned him a softer response. No physician in an American emergency room was okay to keep going. They went because patients kept arriving and payroll did not include emotional collapse. But Adam was not asking as a system representative. He was asking as a human being who had seen a bloody county prosecutor call Leah's name from a gurney 30 minutes earlier. She met his eyes. "No," she said. "But yes." He nodded in a way that meant he understood both answers. Mrs. Alvarez turned out to be an 83-year-old with pneumonia, a purse full of hard candy, and an opinion about every medication she had ever been prescribed. Leah adjusted antibiotics, listened to her lungs, reassured her daughter, explained why they were admitting her, and signed another stack of orders. She kept her voice low and even. She touched the old woman's shoulder when the woman started crying because she was afraid of spending another night in the hospital after losing her sister there last winter. Leah spoke gently, and the gentleness cost her more than sharpness would have. Every act of care tonight felt like dragging silk over broken glass. At 12:37 a.m., between patients, she finally went into the family consultation room and found the teenage boy's mother sitting with a hospital chaplain and 2 men who looked like brothers, both wearing work boots still powdered with sheetrock dust. The room had one humming vending machine, a fake ficus in the corner, and a box of tissues positioned in the middle of the table with the calculated neutrality of a peace offering. The mother's face was blotched and swollen. Her mascara had dried in dark rivers. When she saw Leah, She stood so fast her chair scraped backward. Leah braced herself for anger. Anger. She could survive. The woman only asked, "Did he suffer?" Leah closed the door behind her. She had delivered versions of this conversation more times than she could count. The trick, if there was one, was to resist the bureaucracy of grief. Families wanted medicine translated into mercy. They wanted time turned into meaning. Leah sat opposite her and folded her hands to stop them shaking. When he came in, he was already critically ill, she said. He was not alone. We were with him the entire time. The mother searched her face so hard Leah felt exposed, as though some private truth might slide out if looked at long enough. But did he know he was dying? She whispered. The chaplain lowered his head. One of the brothers stared fixedly at the table. Leah thought of the boy's lashes, the dirt in his sneakers, the blood by his nose. She thought of her own son at 15, all elbows and resentment and the furious need to be left alone right up until illness frightened him, when he would become, for half an hour, the little boy who used to sleep with one hand, fisted in the hem of her t-shirt. She could have hidden inside procedure, said there was no way to know. Instead, she heard herself say, "I don't think he was aware for very long. It was partly guesswork, partly kindness, partly the nearest honest thing she had left." The mother nodded once, then pressed a fist to her mouth. "He told me he was just going to a bonfire. I told him to be home by midnight." Her voice fractured. "I was mad because he took the truck without asking." Leah felt with hideous clarity the ordinary domestic scale of disaster. Midnight curfew, borrowed truck, the routine annoyance before a child steps into catastrophe and leaves all unfinished arguments hanging forever in the kitchen air. One of the brothers looked up. "Sheriff says they found pills on him." The words were not accusatory, but they held the first shape of blame. The desperate search for a reason that would make the loss legible. Leah chose her response carefully. "The medical examiner will determine exactly what happened. Tonight, all I can tell you is that he was very, very sick when he arrived." The mother's eyes sharpened through tears. "You tried?" Leah took a breath. "Yes." The woman's shoulders dropped, not with comfort, but with the brutal acceptance of someone whose body had run out of ways to hold itself up. Leah stayed another 5 minutes, answered what she could, told them someone would walk them through next steps, then stood to leave. As she reached the door, the mother said, "Doctor." Leah turned. "Thank you for not giving up on him." Leah stood there a beat too late. The words struck directly into the place where Owen's half-formed confession still echoed. "Thank you for not giving up." She managed a nod and stepped out into the hall before her face changed. The corridor was colder now. Night shift always grew colder after midnight, as if the building itself lost body heat. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past trauma, headphones in, eyes down. Rain streaked the ambulance bay windows. In the waiting room, a local campaign ad played on mute over a weather alert banner. The candidate smiled broadly beside a grain elevator and a flag. Promise, stability, family values. Leah stared at the silent mouth, moving through slogans, and thought of Owen's campaign speeches. All that practiced conviction. The hand on her back as they entered fundraisers together. The whispered, "Just an hour, then we can leave." That never meant an hour. She went into the physician lounge, shut the door, and finally let herself lean against it. The room was lit by the blue glow of a vending machine, and the weak yellow under-cabinet light over a sink full of abandoned mugs. Someone had left half a blueberry muffin uncovered on a paper plate. A refrigerator motor kicked on with a low growl. Leah opened her locker, found her phone, and saw 12 missed calls. 6 from an unknown number that was probably media, 2 from Noah, 1 from her sister in Tampa, 3 from Owen's office manager, Denise Talbot. The screen felt hot in her hand. Noah. She had not called him. Of course he had heard. She pictured him in his cramped graduate housing apartment, one sneaker on, one off, laptop open, some headline sliding across his screen about the county prosecutor, shot with campaign aide dead at scene. She pictured the exact moment his jaw would set. So much like Owen's it sometimes infuriated her. She pressed call before she could think better of it. He picked up on the first ring. "Mom." "No, hello." Just that one word, hard with controlled panic. Leah swallowed. "I'm here." She heard city noise in the background, a siren far away, footsteps in a hallway, the thin walls of young adulthood. "Is Dad alive?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Straight to the central wound. Noah had always done that, even as a child, asking the question under the question until adults felt stripped down around him. "He's in surgery," Leah said. "He was shot in the abdomen. He made it to the OR." Silence. Then, was he with her? The fact that Noah did not need Dana's name told Leah everything she should have noticed sooner. Her hand tightened around the phone. "You knew." It came out flatter than she intended. "I knew something," he said. Not everything. I saw texts last Thanksgiving when he left his phone on the kitchen counter. The room seemed to tilt. Leah sank onto the vinyl couch without feeling her knees bend. Thanksgiving. 4 months. 4 months of carving turkey, setting the extra leaf in the dining table, pretending normalcy around a son who had looked at his father and seen the crack running through the house. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. On the line, she heard him exhale, shaky and angry. "Because you were already working all the time and pretending not to see half the crap in that house. Because every time I tried to say something about him, you defended him or changed the subject. Because I didn't want to become the person who set fire to whatever was left." Leah closed her eyes. The words hurt because they were not entirely wrong. She had seen fragments, late nights, hidden screens, the cultivated distance between explanation and detail. But suspicion required energy to pursue, and for years her energy had gone to patience, to bills, to surviving the architecture of 2 careers built on public service and private exhaustion. "Noah," her voice thinned, "I need you to listen to me. There may be financial charges coming." Carla said Dana may have been cooperating in an investigation. He was quiet. Then he gave a short, humorless laugh that sounded too old for 22. "Of course there are. You need to stay where you are tonight." "I was already looking at flights." "No," the word snapped out of her before she could soften it. "Not until I know what this is. Not until I know whether the press is outside the house, whether deputies are treating him as a victim or a suspect." Whether she stopped because her voice had climbed. She lowered it by force. "Stay in Chicago until morning." Noah said nothing for so long she thought the call had dropped. When he spoke again, anger had been replaced by something worse. Weariness. "Mom, was he going to leave you?" She stared at the dark screen of the microwave over the sink, seeing only her own dim reflection. That question she could not answer, and the not knowing humiliated her more than any fact Carla had delivered. "I don't know," she said. "Okay." Another silence. Then, softer. "Are you alone?" That finally cracked something in her. Not all the way. Just enough to let breath catch in her throat. "I'm at the hospital," she said. "I know where you are." Noah's voice gentled in spite of itself. "That's not what I asked." Leah pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth. Through the lounge door, she could hear the muffled intercom, a monitor alarm, a burst of laughter from somebody at the nurse's station laughing because the body sometimes protected itself with bad timing. "Yes," she said at last. "I'm alone. Call Aunt Beth if you need somebody there." "I will." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Noah let it pass. "Text me when you know if he makes it out." "I will." He did not say "I love you," neither did she. Their family, even before tonight, had gotten practiced at carrying love in indirect containers. The call ended. Leah sat still, phone in hand, listening to the refrigerator hum until a knock came at the lounge door. She stood too quickly and had to steady herself on the arm of the couch. Carla stepped in. Rain gone now, hair flatter, fatigue digging shadows under her eyes. She held a clear evidence bag. Inside it was Owen's wallet, his watch, his ring, and his phone. Leah stared at the phone as if it might still be warm from his body. Carla closed the door behind her. "Surgery says he's alive for now. They controlled the bleed. He's not out of danger. For now." Leah nodded once. Carla didn't hand over the bag. "I need you to hear the rest before you ask for that phone." Leah's entire body went cold. "Then say it." Carla took a breath. Dana was shot once in the chest. Close range. Ballistics at the scene suggest Owen's service weapon was fired. The vending machine buzzed softly in the corner. Leah heard every mechanical sound in the room with painful precision. The compressor, the ceiling light, the wet squeak of Carla's duty belt when she shifted weight. "Suggest," Leah repeated, meaning not confirmed, not yet. Carla's face was carved back to professionalism now, compassion tucked away because the information itself demanded structure. Owen claims a third person was there. Says somebody came up from the packing lot, struggle, shots fired. But there's no second set of prints on the truck, no obvious additional tire tracks we can see in the mud yet, and his timeline is already inconsistent. Leah looked at the evidence bag and thought with sick clarity of all the times Owen had carried that weapon into county meetings. All the times he'd placed his wallet and keys on the kitchen island, all the ordinary rituals that turned, under enough pressure, into evidence. "And the money?" she said. "Search warrant executed on his office tonight after the shooting." State Bureau moved fast. They found ledgers. Carla paused. "Leah, this may turn into homicide and corruption before sunrise." Leah laughed again, because the body sometimes chose laughter, when the alternative was to tear itself open in front of another human being. It sounded terrible. "So my husband gets shot during an affair with a dead potential witness, and you're standing in a break room telling me he might also be a murderer." Carla did not flinch. "Yes." Leah looked down at her hands. They were steady now. That frightened her more than shaking had. Some deeper system inside her had finished reacting and moved into storage mode, shelving feeling until function was complete. "Can I see him?" she asked. "Not yet." ICU's still settling him. Carla lowered the evidence bag onto the counter but kept one hand on it. "And Leah? Whatever is on this phone, you cannot touch it. Not tonight. I need you to understand that before this gets harder." Harder. The words sat there, absurdly small. Leah lifted her eyes to Carla's face. "You think there's still room for harder?" Carla gave her a look, full of exhausted pity and hard-earned realism. "There always is." A code alarm sounded faintly somewhere down the hall, then another voice cut in and canceled it. Leah stared at the phone inside the plastic. She imagined texts, photos, passwords, lies given digital shape. She imagined Dana's last minutes in a truck on Miller Road, while rain started over the empty packing lot, and Owen decided what version of events he would carry back alive. She imagined Noah at Thanksgiving, seeing enough on a bright little screen to understand the family geography had changed while his mother kept setting plates on the table. "I need 5 minutes," Leah said. Carla nodded, but did not leave. "You have 3. Then ICU will call. And then this night keeps moving whether either of us likes it or not." Leah leaned both palms on the counter and bowed her head, not in prayer, because prayer required belief in a clean witness, but in something closer to triage. What mattered first? What bled fastest? What could still be saved? And what would have to be cut away to keep the rest alive? She tried to picture Owen not as husband, not as public official, not as suspect, but simply as a wounded man in a hospital bed who might wake and speak. But all her mind would give her was Dana Whitaker laughing in her kitchen with one of Leah's wine glasses in hand, and Noah silently carrying knowledge through Thanksgiving dinner like hot metal in his pocket, and a mother in consultation room B, thanking Leah for not giving up on a son whose body had already crossed too far to return. When the ICU pager vibrated on Carla's belt, both women looked up at once. Carla checked the screen, her expression flattening into the controlled blankness law enforcement learned when every message threatened to become paperwork or grief. "They're moving him," she said. "Post-op instability. They want to know who has medical power if he crashes again." Leah stared at her for a beat, as if the words were arranged incorrectly. Medical power. Marriage reduced to a checkbox under emergency circumstances. "I do," she said. Her mouth felt dry enough that the sentence scraped coming out. Carla nodded once, already reaching for the door. "Then you need to go now." Leah moved before thought could catch up. They stepped into the hallway together, into the refrigerated brightness of the overnight corridor, and the hospital resumed swallowing her whole. A transport tech rolled past with an empty bed. Somewhere near imaging, a toddler was crying in irregular hiccuping bursts that sounded more exhausted than wounded. The smell had shifted from rain and diesel to overcleaned floor wax, and the faint cooked cabbage odor that rose out of institutional ventilation after midnight. Leah's clogs squeaked once on a damp patch where someone had recently mopped. She hated that she noticed it. She hated that her mind, under pressure, sharpened around trivial details as if precision about wax and footwear might save her from precision about blood and betrayal. The ICU sat on the 3rd floor, beyond a set of badge-locked glass doors and a waiting area decorated in the aggressive calm of modern medicine. Soft beige chairs, abstract blue artwork, a Keurig machine with 3 empty pods left on the counter, a wall-mounted television turned down low on a home renovation show in which smiling people argued about countertops, as if that qualified as catastrophe. Leah hit the elevator button so hard the plastic clicked under her thumb. Carla stood beside her with the evidence bag hanging from one hand. The phone inside knocked softly against Owen's watch. "You don't have to come in with me," Leah said without looking at her. "Yes, I do," Carla said. The doors opened. They stepped into the elevator, and the mirrored panel at the back threw them both at Leah from a bad angle. One woman in wrinkled scrubs flecked with old blood, hair slipping loose, eyes too bright. One deputy in a damp tan uniform, with fatigue riding hard on her shoulders. For a second, Leah saw them not as participants but as characters in the kind of local scandal people narrated over diner coffee for years. The prosecutor's wife. The deputy who brought the news. Mercy County specialized in tragedies with an audience. The elevator rose with that smooth, impersonal motion hospitals perfected, carrying the sick, the hopeful, the guilty, the dead. Leah remembered riding another elevator in another hospital when Noah was 7 and had split his chin open on a skate ramp, his small body furious with pain, his tears sticky on her scrub sleeve because she had come straight from shift and still smelled like antiseptic when she met Owen in the pediatric ER. Owen had made Noah laugh by pretending the stitches would give him pirate credibility at school. Later, in the car, Owen had reached across the console and squeezed Leah's knee and said, "We make a good team." She had believed him with the full, unstinting trust of a tired woman who needed partnership more than romance. The elevator chimed. Third floor. ICU doors slid open on a quieter world. Not silent, never silent, but quieter in a way that made every machine seem morally significant. The unit smelled like chlorhexidine, hand lotion, stale coffee, and that unmistakable undernote of heated plastic tubing. Overhead lights were dimmed in the hallway, though patient rooms glowed in slices through half-closed doors. Monitors pulsed and beeped in staggered time signatures. A nurse at the station looked up, recognized Leah, and straightened with the specific discomfort people wore when personal disaster stepped into professional space. "Dr. Mercer," she said. "He's in 12. Doctor, Shaw is inside." Leah nodded. Carla stayed back by the desk, speaking quietly to a unit clerk. Leah walked toward room 12, on legs that no longer felt attached to choice. She passed an old man on BiPAP, sleeping with his mouth open under the mask. Past a woman with silver hair whose room was full of flowers and family photos taped to the window. Past a supply cart with suction canisters stacked in neat translucent columns. At room 12, she stopped just outside the threshold and looked in. Owen lay propped at a slight angle in the bed, skin ashy under the ICU light, an oxygen cannula under his nose, lines everywhere, central line in the neck, arterial line taped at the wrist, Foley tubing disappearing under the blanket, drain bulb darkening on the sheet. The monitor above him mapped his existence into colored numbers, heart rate too fast, pressure holding, barely. The ventilator had not been needed, at least not now. His face was slack with pain medication, but not erased. He still looked like himself, which was somehow worse. Dr. Nikhil Shah stood at the bedside reviewing a chart on the computer, his tie gone, scrub cap still on from the OR. He was a surgeon with elegant hands and a brutal gift for bad news delivered without ornament. He turned when Leah stepped in, and his expression changed from clinical concentration to something almost tender. "He made it through the repair," Shah said quietly. "Liver laceration, bowel perforation, significant blood loss. We controlled what we could. The next 12 hours matter." Leah moved closer to the bed. Owen's wedding ring was gone. The pale band of skin where it had sat for decades was exposed and strangely intimate. "Will he wake up?" she asked. "He's drifting in and out. He's not fully oriented." Shah lowered his voice further. "Before you ask, yes, he understands enough to answer basic questions. No, I wouldn't rely on him for anything complex or legally clean in this state." Legally clean. In another life, Leah might have appreciated the precision. Tonight, she only nodded. Shah glanced toward the door where Carla waited, respectful and watchful. "I can give you a minute," he said. Not much more. After he left, the room tightened around the sound of the monitor and Owen's thin, wet breathing. Leah pulled the visitor chair closer but did not sit. Standing felt more honest. He opened his eyes before she spoke, as if some animal part of him sensed her presence even through narcotics. They were bloodshot, unfocused for a second, then locked on her. Shame moved through his face, slow and unmistakable. "Leah." He said her name like a plea and an apology and a memory, all at once. She folded her arms. The posture was defensive, yes, but it also kept her hands from doing what they had spent 27 years doing around him without permission. Adjusting a collar, straightening a blanket, touching his wrist to measure fever, resting briefly against the warm place where shoulder became neck. "Don't use my name like it fixes anything," she said. His mouth twitched, either from pain or from the effort to form a reply. "I wasn't going to leave you." The sentence hit her so hard she almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was grotesquely insufficient. Her voice came out soft, which made it crueler. "That's your opening argument?" He swallowed. She could see the effort of it in his throat. "I know how this looks. Owen, Dana Whitaker is dead." The monitor kicked faster. He closed his eyes. "I know. There are state investigators in your office. I know. Our son knew enough about your affair to ask me about it before you ever told me the truth." That made his eyes open again. For the first time, genuine shock cut through sedation. "No one knew?" "At Thanksgiving." The shame on his face deepened, until for one raw instant, Leah saw not the county prosecutor, not the practiced public man, but the exhausted private coward beneath him, the one who had likely spent months constructing a fiction and calling it management. He stared at the blanket over his legs. "I never meant for him to know. You never meant for me to know either. That's not. Don't." The word cracked. She steadied it. "Do not make this about intention. I have spent my entire adult life around intention. Intentional tort, intentional homicide, good intentions. Policy intention. Marriage intention. I do not care what you meant. I care what you did. He breathed through the pain, eyes glistening now. Whether from medication or emotion, she could not tell. It started last year. Of course it did. After the primary. After your mother died. Leah's jaw clenched. There it was. The first hint of explanation via timing, as if grief could absorb responsibility by osmosis. Do not put my mother in your mouth tonight. He turned his head slightly toward her, the motion small and helpless against the pillow. I'm not excusing it. No. You're contextualizing. It's your favorite trick. He flinched. She hated that she knew his habits well enough to name them while standing over him with drainage tubes spilling blood into a plastic bulb. Silence stretched. The infusion pump clicked. Down the hall, someone laughed once and then hushed themselves. Finally, Owen said, Dana came to me because she found discrepancies in campaign transfers. She thought Denise was skimming. Leah stared. Your office manager? At first. His breath shivered. Then Dana found county settlement money moved through a discretionary account. Older than the campaign, older than Denise. Leah felt something inside her go very still. You moved it. He looked away. I signed off on things I shouldn't have. That is not an answer. I let funds get redirected. To who? He pressed his lips together. She leaned in. To who, Owen? People who could keep the office functioning. Judges who needed persuading. Informants who couldn't be on paper. County commissioners who wanted problems buried before election season. It didn't start as stealing. He said it like that mattered. Leah stared at him with a surgeon's coldness, trying to isolate the living tissue from the rot. At what point did it become stealing? When I needed it to. The honesty of that landed harder than another lie would have. For a moment, she could only hear the blood rushing in her ears. Owen's office had always run on the murky margins of small county power, the favors and sealed bargains and whispered trade-offs people called practical because naming them corruption required admitting how daily and useful corruption could be. She had known that abstractly. She had not known it had entered her checking account, her mortgage, Noah's tuition, the kitchen where she sliced apples on Sunday mornings. How much? She asked. Owen swallowed again. I don't know the final number. Then, give me the real number, not the lawyer number. His eyes shut. A few hundred at first. Then tens. Then more. Tens of thousands. Maybe more. Leah sat down finally because her knees were threatening to fold. The vinyl chair creaked under her. She pictured every domestic object in their house acquiring a tag. Dining table. Partial value from misappropriated funds. Noah's first-year housing deposit. Touched by dirty money. The deck repairs Owen had insisted they could finally afford. All of it contaminated. And Dana? She said. His eyes opened again, slower this time. She wanted me to come in. She had copies. She said if I cooperated, maybe it stayed at the state level and didn't become federal. And were you sleeping with her before or after she started building a case against you? His face changed in a way she had seen only once before, when Noah was 12 and had asked if Grandpa's drinking was why Grandma always slept in the guest room. Not just guilt. Exposure. After, he said. At first. Leah let out one breath through her nose. Jesus Christ. He winced. Whether at the oath or the pain she didn't know. I told myself it was separate. Of course you did. Then it wasn't. She looked at him for a long moment. Did you love her? It was the wrong question in the middle of a corruption, confession, and possible homicide. It was also the only one her body demanded. Owen stared at the ceiling tiles, each one pocked with tiny acoustic holes like a carefully engineered blankness. I don't know what I felt, he said at last. I felt watched with her. Necessary, less tired, I felt. He stopped, ashamed. Leah finished it for him because she knew the dialect of middle-aged ruin too well. Young. He closed his eyes. Maybe. That answer hurt more than if he had said yes. Love could be tragic. Youth was pathetic. Leah rose again because sitting made her feel trapped. Carla says, ballistics, tie your gun to the scene. He looked at her quickly, alarm overriding the morphine haze. I didn't shoot Dana. Then tell me what happened. The monitor quickened again. Owen licked dry lips. We met to talk. She wanted me to turn over everything before the bureau executed warrants. She had a file in her car. He paused, gathering himself between breaths. I told her I would. I think I meant it. Then headlights came through the rain from the parking lot side. Not the road. Off the gravel. Dana got scared. She thought maybe I set her up. We started yelling. I got out. Somebody came up behind me. Male, I think. Bigger than me. There was mud, shouting. I grabbed for the gun because I saw a hand. Then it went off. Leah listened with the fierce attention she reserved for chest sounds and lies. You think. I know there was someone else. Why didn't dispatch find Prince? Because it was raining, Leah. His voice frayed with frustration. Because Miller Road turns to soup in weather like that. Because half the county has been out there dumping trash and drinking beer since 1988. I don't know. I was bleeding. Who would want Dana dead? He laughed once, then grimaced. How long do you have? Leah thought of county commissioners, deputies, defense attorneys, drug task force middlemen, donors, desperate local men whose names never made headlines, but moved envelopes from one office to another. A whole ecosystem of motive. That was the problem with corruption once it reached scale. Anyone could become the last honest witness, and therefore the next body. Give me names, she said. He turned his head toward her, but before he could answer, the door opened and Carla stepped in with Shaw behind her. Carla's eyes went first to Leah, then to Owen. He's done enough for now. Leah started to object, and heard the rawness in her own voice. I need 5 more minutes. Shaw shook his head. You need him alive. Practical, brutal, true. Owen looked at Leah with sudden urgency. Denise, he said. Check Denise. Carla's focus sharpened at once. Denise Talbot? Owen nodded weakly. She handled campaign books before Dana. She knows the storage unit. Route 14, behind the old tire shop. Key code is... He faltered, eyes slipping. Owen. Leah stepped toward the bed despite herself. Stay with it. He dragged in a breath. 2709. Carla had her notebook out already. What's in the unit? Boxes, ledgers, backup drives. His voice thinned to almost nothing. If Denise hears I talked, she'll run. Shaw moved in, checking lines, reading numbers with surgical impatience. That's enough. Carla stepped back toward the door, already turning the information into motion. Leah stayed where she was. Owen's eyes were half closed again, but he reached one hand a few inches over the blanket. Not far, just enough to expose need. This time she looked at the hand and understood with devastating clarity that she could refuse it and still love the life they had once built. Those truths were not opposites anymore. They were the fracture. She placed 2 fingers briefly against the back of his hand, a touch so light it barely counted as comfort. His skin was cool. He exhaled like a man feeling rope after deep water. Then Leah withdrew. Carla was waiting just outside the room. I'm going to Route 14, she said. I can have a unit at your house before the media gets worse. Leah stared through the ICU glass at the reflection of herself superimposed over Owen's bed. No, let them come. Carla frowned. Leah, let them stand on the lawn and say whatever they're going to say. My house stopped being mine before tonight. I just didn't know it yet. Carla watched her for a second, then nodded in the way people did when they realized persuasion had become a luxury. I'll call when I know about Denise. Leah remained by the bed as Carla left, listening to the doors hiss open and shut, listening to Shaw give low instructions to the nurse, listening to Owen breathe in pained shallow pulls as if every inhale had to decide whether it was worth the effort. Outside, the storm had moved east. The parking lot glistened under sodium lights. Dawn was still hours off, but the black at the windows had softened just enough to suggest the world was already preparing to reveal what night had done. Leah stayed in room 12 until the nurse, a compact woman named Marisol with a silver cross pinned inside her scrub top, adjusted Owen's drip and gave Leah the kind of kind look people in hospitals learn to weaponize gently, a look that said you may remain human for another minute but not much longer. He needs to rest, Marisol said. Leah nodded, because resisting would only expose that she had no idea where else to put herself. She stepped into the corridor, and the ICU door clicked shut behind her with a sound far too neat for what it enclosed. The waiting room outside had emptied, except for a man asleep, with his boots on the coffee table and a woman knitting under the television glow, her hands moving automatically while her eyes stayed fixed on some private point past the yarn. Leah crossed to the window and looked down at the parking lot. Rainwater filled the potholes in silver-black pools. News vans had begun to gather along the curb beyond the ambulance entrance, white logos glaring under portable lights. A cameraman in a hooded jacket smoked beside a satellite truck, the ember flaring orange each time he dragged on it. The sight of him made Leah's stomach turn. It was one thing to have your life detonated. It was another to watch strangers arrive with extension cords. Her phone vibrated. Carla, Leah answered at once. Talk. Carla sounded breathless, wind and engine noise crowding the line. We hit the storage unit. Denise was here first. Leah gripped the windowsill. Alive? For now. Tried to pull out in her SUV when units rolled up. Clipped a deputy cruiser, then jumped the drainage ditch behind the tire shop and went on foot. K9's tracking. We've got the unit open. A pause, then Carla's voice lowered. Owen wasn't exaggerating. Boxes everywhere. Campaign records, county ledgers, burner phones, external drives. More paper than one office should generate in 10 years, unless it's hiding something. Leah closed her eyes. She could see it, absurdly clearly. A rented metal box smelling of dust, rubber, and old heat, full of the physical weight of secrets. Anything on Dana? Not yet. But there's a second lockbox inside with her name on a file tab. We're inventorying. Leah felt the floor under her feet become theoretical. Call me when you know whether Denise had a weapon. I will. Carla hesitated. Leah, you should not go home this morning. Why? Because the press has multiplied, and because if Denise talked to anyone before she ran, there's no telling who's nervous right now. Leah almost said, I'm not afraid, but that would have been a lie born of fatigue, not courage. Fear was there. It just had to stand in line behind humiliation, rage, professional obligation, and the simple metabolic need to stay upright. I'm not going anywhere yet, she said. Good. The call ended. Leah stayed by the window, phone still in hand, while the news trucks below adjusted their lights toward the entrance as if angling for a clean shot at catastrophe. Behind her, the knitting needles clicked softly. Somewhere down the hall, a cartwheel squealed in need of oil. For one irrational second, Leah wanted to walk downstairs, out through the automatic doors, and tell the cameras that this was not a story about scandal or sex or county politics, that it was about how rot entered a life in administrative increments, how a marriage could be contaminated not all at once, but by accumulated evasions so small they passed for scheduling conflicts, by weariness, by convenience, by the human appetite to postpone the ugliest truth until postponement itself became the structure. She wanted to tell them that the dead always arrived before the explanation did. Instead, she turned away from the window and went back to work. The emergency department had changed texture by 4 a.m. The first frantic surge of Saturday night disaster had burned down to a gray-blue fluorescent endurance. Fewer sirens, more coughs, the waiting room full of people who had chosen pain over sleep only after exhausting every other option. Leah took the stairs instead of the elevator because she needed movement with friction in it. On the landing between second and first, she stopped and braced a hand against the cinderblock wall as a wave of dizziness moved through her. Not dramatic enough to qualify as collapse, just enough to remind her that adrenaline had an expiry date. She had not eaten since noon, had not sat for more than minutes at a time. Her body was starting to call in debts. She stood there until the wave passed, and the stairwell smell of bleach, wet concrete, and old steam pipes became just smell again, not a trigger for nausea. Back in the ED, the charge nurse, Tasha Green, intercepted her near triage with a paper cup of coffee and half a peanut butter cracker packet. Tasha was 50, broad-shouldered, unshockable, and had spent 15 years at Mercy County mastering the art of sounding rude while saving lives. Drink this before you become a patient, Tasha said. Leah took both without protest. The coffee was burnt enough to strip varnish, but hot. The crackers stuck to the roof of her mouth. Any word from upstairs? Tasha asked. Leah looked at her. Do you want the professional update or the tabloid one? Tasha's face tightened. I want to know whether you're about to keel over in my department. Then the answer is, not yet. Tasha nodded, apparently satisfied by the absence of sentiment. We've got a domestic in 9, laceration repair in 11, and psych hold in hallbed C trying to negotiate with the ceiling tiles. Mrs. Alvarez made it to MedSurg and called her daughter ungrateful in front of the transport team, so she's doing better. Normalcy, delivered in a list. Leah felt gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. I'll take 9. Room 9 held a woman in her 30s with a split lip, bruising already rising under one eye, and a sheriff's deputy taking a statement she clearly did not want to give. The woman's name was Janice Bell. Her boyfriend had thrown a lamp, which in practice meant thrown a lamp at her face and then cried afterward. According to the deputy's careful euphemistic summary, Janice sat rigid on the bed in a gas station sweatshirt, arms wrapped around her middle, while dried blood flaked at the corner of her mouth. Leah examined her gently, ordered a facial CT, and asked the routine questions in the routine voice. Safe at home. Weapons present. Children in the house. Each answer widened the shape of the problem without altering its familiarity. Janice kept insisting she was fine, which meant she was not. She also kept flinching whenever the deputy shifted his boots, which meant the body had already learned what the mind was trying to deny. Do you want us to call someone for you? Leah asked after the deputy stepped out to take a radio call. Janice stared at the floor. My sister's in Macon. She's got 3 kids in a 2-bedroom. Leah waited. Silence often did more work than advice. After a long beat, Janice said, he wasn't always like this. Leah looked at the swelling under her eye. No one ever is at first. Janice gave a short, cracked laugh and immediately looked guilty for it. You married? The question was not appropriate. It was also one of the oldest ways patients asked whether the person treating them had standing in the court of private damage. Leah could have lied, could have said yes and left it there. Instead, she heard herself answer, complicated night to ask. Janice glanced up for the first time, reading something in Leah's face and deciding not to press. Right. Leah handed her a tissue. Their fingers brushed. Janice's hands were cold. When somebody hurts you and then tells you their reasons, the reasons start taking up more space than the hurting, Leah said quietly. Try not to let that happen. Janice's eyes filled. How? It was the kind of question medicine did not bill for and could not really fix. Leah thought of Owen in the ICU, of his careful contextualizing voice, of all the reasons queued up behind his actions waiting for admission. She thought of Noah seeing the crack before she did and carrying the knowledge alone. You let facts be louder than love for a while, Leah said. At least until you're safe. Janice stared at her, then nodded once in the small, solemn way people did when they recognized advice born of fresh wreckage. When Leah left room 9, the sky beyond the ambulance bay windows had gone from black to a bruised charcoal blue. Dawn was approaching with bureaucratic indifference. The psych hold in hallbed C was indeed talking to the ceiling, mostly about a radio signal he believed was transmitting through the acoustic tiles. The laceration repair in 11 was a high school baseball coach who had caught a bottle in a parking lot fight after trying to stop 2 of his players from throwing punches at a house party. The details were ridiculous, provincial, heartbreakingly normal. Leah stitched his forearm while he apologized for bleeding on her shoes and asked if his wife had called yet. She moved through these tasks with an eerie steadiness, a machine assembled out of training and temporary denial. Yet every pause between patients became dangerous. In pauses, thought returned. In pauses, her mind wandered upstairs to Owen's drain output, to Dana's body on wet gravel, to Denise Talbot running through a drainage ditch in dress shoes with county secrets in her head. At 5:12 a.m. Noah texted, "Is he alive?" No question mark. Leah stood at the medication cart and typed back, "Yes, critical but stable after surgery." There was no immediate reply. She slid the phone back into her pocket and signed 2 prescriptions with a pen she later realized was not hers. Tasha caught her by the charting station 10 minutes later. "Media's asking for comment at the front desk," Tasha said. "Security's pushing them back, but one of them recognized you from the campaign dinners." Leah kept her eyes on the chart in front of her. "Then security can enjoy their morning." Tasha leaned one elbow on the counter. "You need someone to run interference?" Leah looked up. Tasha's expression had gone softer than usual, which meant she was worried enough to ignore style. "No. That's not a medal-winning answer." Leah almost said, "I know," but what came out was, "If I stop moving, I'll have to decide what's true." Tasha regarded her for a long moment. "Baby, the truth does not require your permission." The sentence landed with the exact force of something both obvious and overdue. Leah looked away first. "I know." Tasha straightened, back to business. "Then at least let me get you 10 minutes off the board." 5, 7. Fine. Tasha jerked her head toward the ambulance bay exit, where the dawn light was beginning to seep under the roll-up doors in a weak gray wash. Leah took those 7 minutes outside behind the hospital where the smokers congregated under a corrugated awning bolted to the brick wall. At this hour, the space was empty, except for 2 crushed paper cups and a patch of old cigarette burns on the concrete. The air hit her like cold, wet cloth. Rain had stopped completely. The world smelled rinsed. Damp earth from the grassy embankment. Motor oil from the service road. Distant bacon grease from the diner across Route 9, starting breakfast. Traffic had begun to rise. Not the frantic Friday night kind, but the agricultural and blue-collar churn of a county waking up. Pickup trucks, delivery vans, school buses soon. Leah leaned against the brick and wrapped her arms around herself. The hospital generators thrummed through the wall into her spine. She had not cried. The fact began to trouble her. Not because crying was virtuous, but because its absence suggested some internal triage so severe that feeling had been deferred past its natural window. She tried, briefly, to imagine home. The yellow kitchen light over the sink, the mug Owen always left by the coffee maker, the cedar chest at the foot of their bed, where old photo albums sat under extra blankets. She pictured walking through the front door to find camera crews at the curb and neighbors pretending not to look through blinds. She pictured opening Owen's closet and seeing his suits, each one suddenly costume evidence from a role she had misunderstood. Her phone rang again. "Carla." Leah answered immediately. Carla's voice had changed. "Less wind now, more impact. We got Denise." Leah closed her eyes. "Where?" "Half a mile behind the tire shop." K9 cornered her behind an abandoned feed shed. She had a handgun in her purse, different caliber from the scene, and 3 flash drives in her coat lining. Leah pushed away from the wall. Did she talk? Enough to make things worse. "Of course. Say it." Carla inhaled once. Denise says Dana copied the ledgers and threatened to hand everything to the bureau unless Owen agreed to a full sit-down by Monday morning. Denise claims she arranged Miller Road because Owen said Dana only felt safe meeting off the grid. Denise says she wasn't at the scene. Leah heard the legal carefulness in that phrasing. Claims. Says. But Denise also says Owen knew Dana had a dead man's folder. If anything happened to her, it would go public. Leah stared across the service road at a row of wet pines black against the lightening sky. Then why would he shoot her? That's what we're trying to establish. Denise says he wouldn't. She says the money trail goes beyond him. Leah thought of county commissioners, judges, task force slush funds, all the small-town machinery that liked its dirty hands washed by distance. And the third person? Maybe real. Carla's voice dropped. One of the techs found partial tread marks off the gravel berm behind where Dana's car was parked. 2 washed out to identify, but not obviously from responding units. We also found a cigarette butt with lipstick and fresh male boot impressions near the parking lot entrance. Could be unrelated. Could be kids. Could be the county coming apart. Leah let the information settle. It did not relieve anything. It only redistributed dread. Does the Bureau know about the storage unit? They're here now. And Owen? Still a victim. Still a probable witness. Also still a probable suspect, depending on what the forensics say when they catch up. Carla exhaled. Leah, when you speak to him again, do not coach him. Do not warn him. I know you know that. I'm saying it anyway. You think I'm going to save him. I think you've been married 27 years. People do strange things around that much history. Leah looked out toward the road where the diner sign had just clicked. From OFF to open, red letters buzzing alive against the dim blue morning. Strange things around history. That was one definition of a marriage. I'm not sure what's left to save, she said. Carla was silent for a second. That may be the only reason you can still help. The line clicked dead. Leah stood very still, listening to the highway build itself into day. A food delivery truck backed into the hospital loading dock with a shrill beep beep beep. Somewhere nearby, a bird started making an obnoxiously hopeful sound. The sky had gone from charcoal to a dirty pearl gray. Mercy County was waking up inside the same walls where night had broken her life open, and the normality of that felt obscene. Yet in the obscene normality was also the only path forward. People would need rounds, charts would need signing, deputies would need statements. Noah would need the truth in whatever form she could bear to hand it to him. Owen, if he lived, would need someone not to save him, but to stand in front of the facts and refuse every comforting distortion. Leah went back inside through the side door and washed her hands at the first sink she passed, though they were not dirty in any visible way. Soap, hot water, paper towel, ritual first. Then motion. At the nurse's station, Tasha held up a ringing desk phone and mouthed, "State Bureau." Leah took the receiver. Dr. Mercer. A man introduced himself as Special Agent Paul Kessler and asked whether she would be available later that morning to answer questions about Owen's finances, routines, known associates, and current mental state. The list was almost comical in its thoroughness. Wife. Physician. Accidental witness. To collapse. Leah looked across the department at the curtained bays, the waiting room chairs, the exhausted nurses moving under bad lights, and understood that later that morning would be the first hour of the rest of the damage. "Yes," she said. "I'll be available." When she hung up, Tasha studied her. "You look like hell." Leah gave a faint nod. "Accurate." Tasha pushed a fresh chart toward her. "Then here's your reward." 7-year-old with an asthma flare and a mother threatening to sue weather itself. Leah took the chart. It steadied her more than sympathy would have. She walked toward pediatrics while dawn finally broke across the ambulance bay glass, pale and merciless. And somewhere upstairs in ICU room 12, a man who might be guilty, might be hunted, and was certainly no longer the husband she thought she had began another hour of survival without absolution. The pediatric bay smelled like grape-flavored nebulizer mist, hand sanitizer, and the sweet, stale residue of cereal bars crushed into vinyl chairs by anxious children. The 7-year-old's name was Micah. He sat upright on the bed in dinosaur pajama pants and a superhero t-shirt, breathing too fast, each inhale catching with the soft whistle of narrowed airways. His mother stood beside him, with one hand on his shoulder and the other gripping a phone hard enough to whiten the knuckles, as if outrage might function as oxygen if she applied enough pressure. "This always happens when the weather flips," she said, the second Leah stepped in. "I told his pediatrician the school mold is making it worse, and nobody listens until I'm back here at 6 in the morning." Leah nodded once and moved to the bedside. Micah's curls were damp around his temples. His eyes were wide but not panicked yet, which meant they had intervened in time. "Hey, Micah," Leah said, lowering her voice into the steadier register children trusted faster than adults. "I'm Doctor." Mercer. Can I listen to your chest? He nodded without speaking. Leah warmed the stethoscope between her palms first, then touched it to his back. Tight all through the bases. Wheeze on exhale. Not silent. Thank God. She listened while his mother continued talking, not because the woman expected a response, but because fear often dressed itself as procedural anger. Mold in the classrooms. Insurance refusing a different inhaler. Her ex-husband keeping windows open in the truck during custody weekends. Leah took in the details and stored them the way she stored monitor values. All signal, no judgment. We're going to do another treatment and a dose of steroid, she said. He's moving air. That's the good news. We need to get the inflammation down before he crashes harder. Micah's mother exhaled sharply through her nose. So he's not being admitted? Not unless he stops responding. The mother's whole body loosened half an inch. Leah saw it and recognized the familiar paradox of the American emergency room. People arrived, dreading catastrophe, and, at the same time, terrified they would not qualify for enough catastrophe to be taken seriously. Will it hurt? Micah asked. Leah looked at him. The medicine tastes gross. That's the worst part. You can be mad at me about that for 10 full minutes. His mouth twitched. Not a smile. A pre-smile. Enough. While the respiratory therapist set up the nebulizer, Leah stood by the bed and watched Micah's chest rise and fall under the superhero logo. Small body. Visible effort. The sight struck some primitive nerve she had kept under discipline all night. Noah, at 7, with a split chin. Noah at 10, burning with strep in the back seat while Owen drove too fast toward urgent care. Noah at 15, pretending not to want his mother around while still leaving his bedroom door open when he felt sick. She realized with a slow, cold clarity that she had spent years assuming the most dangerous thing that could happen to her family was exhaustion. Not betrayal. Not institutional rot. Not the private repurposing of public money. Just overwork and the petty erosions it caused. That assumption now seemed not innocent but lazy. She signed Micah's orders and stepped into the hall. Her phone vibrated again. Noah. She answered on the second ring. I've got 3 minutes, she said. She could hear the airport behind him immediately. Rolling suitcases. A gate announcement. The stretched impatience of strangers in transit. Then use them, he said. I'm at O'Hare. Leah closed her eyes. Noah. Don't start with no. I specifically told you not to get on a plane, and I specifically stopped being 12 a while ago. His voice was tight, not defiant exactly, but wound around something more fragile than anger. Mom, I'm coming. Leah leaned one shoulder against the wall outside pediatrics. A transporter pushed past with an elderly man under warmed blankets. Somewhere near triage, someone sneezed violently enough to attract a chorus of, "Bless you," from nurses who had seen too much to leave ordinary civility unused. Listen to me, she said. When you land, do not go to the house. Why? Because there are cameras there, and because law enforcement may still search it depending on what they get from the storage unit and Denise. Silence. Then, quieter. Search our house. The word "our" made something twist in her chest. Maybe. I don't know yet. Jesus. He blew out a breath. Okay, then where? Leah thought quickly. Not her sister Beth, because Beth loved loudly and in person and would turn the day into a campaign of casseroles and rage. Not the house. Not a hotel near the courthouse where reporters would guess. Go to the Marriott off I-75 by the airport. Use your middle name. Text me the room number once you check in. Noah let out a humorless laugh. You sound like a witness protection brochure. I sound like someone who doesn't know how wide this is yet. Do you think Dad killed her? There it was. No glide path, no cushioning. Straight to the artery, same as always. Leah watched Micah's mother through the glass, adjusting the mask on her son's face while the machine turned medicine into mist. I think your father has lied enough that truth now has to be proven from the outside. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have. Noah did not argue. When he spoke again, the hardness had thinned into something younger. Did he ask for me? Leah pictured Owen in the ICU, eyes clouded by pain medication, saying only, "Don't let them call Noah," before his other secrets had broken open. No, she said, then made herself add, not because he didn't think of you. Because he did. Noah was quiet long enough that she heard a boarding announcement cut across the line. I hate that I still care whether he asks, he said. Leah swallowed. So do I. The shared admission opened a small raw space between them. Not healing. Just air. I land at 9:15, he said. Text me if he codes. Text me if the bureau arrests him. Text me if you eat something. The last one almost undid her. I'll try. That means no. Probably. A gate agent's voice rose in the background. Noah said, Mom. She waited. Don't protect him from me. The sentence came out without accusation. That made it worse. Leah felt the truth of her own reflex before she had language for it. Years of smoothing, translating Owen's absences into workload, his temper into pressure, his political compromises into necessity. She had not thought of it as protection, because naming it that way would have implicated her. "I won't," she said. This time she meant it enough to be afraid of what keeping the promise would cost. After the call ended, Leah stared at her dark phone screen and saw, reflected faintly over her own face, the corridor behind her. Motion, fluorescent glare, the endless hospital braid of suffering and procedure. Her own expression looked older than it had yesterday. Not dramatically, just as if some internal scaffolding had been removed overnight, and the skin around her eyes had to relearn its job. Tasha came up beside her, holding a chart and a banana someone had probably stolen from a patient breakfast tray. "Before you faint and cause paperwork, take this." Leah accepted the banana. "You are becoming maternal in your old age," Tasha snorted. "Don't spread that around. I have a reputation for cruelty." She handed over the chart. "Also, Agent Kessler is downstairs and wants to know when he gets your best professional self." Leah glanced at the time. 7:03 a.m. The windows over the ambulance bay had gone fully pale, morning now undeniable. Day shift nurses were coming in with clean hair and travel mugs, faces still soft with sleep before the department scuffed them up. "Tell him 30 minutes, Leah said. "And tell him if he pulls a federal tone in my hallway, I'll make him wait an hour." "State," Tasha corrected. "Worse," Leah muttered. Tasha actually smiled at that. Brief and fierce, then moved off. Leah ate the banana in 4 fast bites beside the Pyxis, barely tasting it. The sugar hit her bloodstream like a rumor of rescue. She checked on Micah, whose wheeze had eased enough that his breathing no longer looked like work being done by a much older person inside a child's body. His mother thanked Leah in the embarrassed, abrupt way people often did after an hour spent angry at the wrong institution. Leah discharged them with careful instructions, watched the two of them leave hand in hand, and felt a sudden illogical stab of envy, not for their problems, for the visible shape of them. Mold, inhalers, weather, custody, weekends. These were solvable in pieces. Her own life had gone granular. Every fact broke into smaller facts, each one contaminating another. At 7:41, she met Agent Paul Kessler in a consultation room on the administrative side of the hospital, away from the ambulance bay, away from the cameras, away from the possibility of being seen as anything other than a useful source. The room had no windows, just a laminate table, 4 chairs, a speakerphone, and a whiteboard with old ghost marks from erasable ink that no amount of cleaning had fully removed. Kessler was in his early 40s, clean-shaven, navy suit despite the hour, tie still properly centered, the kind of man who looked as if he ironed his own caution. With him was a woman in plain clothes who introduced herself as Investigator Marin Cho from the State Bureau. Cho said almost nothing at first. She simply took out a notebook and watched Leah, with the unsparing stillness of someone who believed silence improved accuracy. Kessler began politely enough. How long had Leah been married to Owen? Did she handle household finances? Had she noticed unusual expenditures, cash withdrawals, hidden devices, meetings outside ordinary campaign or office activity? Did Owen ever speak of Dana Whitaker in a personal context? Leah answered each question with a care that felt almost surgical. 27 years. Joint account and separate retirement portfolios. Some unexplained money, yes, but framed as campaign reimbursements and deferred consulting fees. Dana described as valuable staff, then less often mentioned at home precisely when perhaps she should have been more often mentioned. Kessler took notes without visible judgment. Cho watched Leah's face instead of her pen, which made every pause feel measurable. "Did your husband ever express fear recently?" Kessler asked. "Of exposure, arrest, or political retaliation?" Leah thought of late-night porch calls, of the way Owen had started checking the front windows before bed, of his sudden obsession with whether the garage door fully latched. She had filed those behaviors under middle-aged anxiety and county politics. Everything had fit somewhere harmless, because harmlessness was easier to maintain than inquiry. "Yes," she said, "but not specifically." He was more distracted, preoccupied. "Secretive?" Cho asked. Her voice was low, precise, almost gentle. Leah turned toward her. "Yes." Cho nodded once, as if confirming an internal sequence. Kessler folded his hands. "We recovered material from the storage unit, suggesting the misappropriation may extend beyond the prosecutor's office. Commissioners, campaign conduits, possibly judicial intermediaries. Your husband appears central, but not solitary." Leah sat very still. This was confirmation, not surprise. And confirmation had its own temperature. Do you think Dana was going to give you everything Monday? She asked. Or leverage him first? Kessler exchanged a glance with Cho. Both are possible. We have communications suggesting she was negotiating immunity for herself. Leah pictured Dana at her kitchen counter again, wineglass in hand, laughing at something Owen said. Not just mistress, not just witness, player, risk manager. Maybe frightened, maybe opportunistic, maybe both. Humans were rarely one clear motive at a time. Then why meet alone on Miller Road? We suspect there were other intended parties, Cho said. Someone did not arrive as expected, or arrived differently than planned. Leah heard the careful lack of claim. Suspect. Intended. She thought of Denise, of a drainage ditch, of a file tab with Dana's name. You're asking whether my husband set her up. Kessler met her Gaza. I'm asking whether, given what you know of him privately, that would be out of character. The question hung there with its own cruel intelligence. Privately. As if privacy were the last valid witness. Leah looked at her hands folded on the table. She thought of Owen volunteering for church legal clinics in their 30s. Owen teaching Noah to parallel park in the high school lot on Sunday afternoons. Owen cutting her mother's steak into smaller pieces after the stroke, because embarrassment made the old woman angry, and anger was easier for her than dependence. She also thought of the smoothness with which he had apparently lied for at least a year, maybe longer, while building hidden accounts and a second life. Character, she realized, was not a fixed object but a field with parts of it left fallow for years until the wrong weather brought up something invasive. The truthful answer, Leah said slowly, is that the man I would have said no about on Thursday is not the man I'm certain I know on Friday. Kessler wrote that down. Of course he did. Cho spoke again. Would you consent to a search of the home computer systems and any personal files under marital privilege we might otherwise need a warrant for? There it was. The fracture-given paperwork. Leah could invoke counsel, delay, protect the house long enough to understand what she was surrendering. She pictured Noah at 9, asleep on the couch under a blanket fort, while election returns played on mute. She pictured family tax folders in the office drawer under old warranties and school photos. She pictured Owen's study, the locked lower cabinet she had never bothered to question because marriage had trained her to treat some doors as maintenance, not mystery. If she consented, the state walked into all of it. If she withheld, she became one more layer between fact and consequence. Saving one thing fractures another, she thought, and understood the story of the night had shifted, not from whether Owen lived, from what survival would require from everyone around him. Yes, she said. Kessler looked up. You're consenting. Yes. Even now, saying it felt like hearing a window crack in winter. I want a receipt for everything removed. I want a copy of the warrant inventory if you end up obtaining one anyway. And I want to be notified before any media release names Noah as connected to the property. Kessler nodded. We can do that. Cho watched Leah a second longer, perhaps checking for signs of collapse, or deceit, or the kind of spousal reversal that happened after one hard night and one softer memory. All she said was, "Thank you." Leah nearly laughed at the absurd courtesy of it. Instead, she stood. Are we done? Kessler closed his notebook. For now. In the hall outside, the administrative wing had fully awakened. Billing staff with ID badges and sensible shoes were arriving. A volunteer wheeled a cart of free newspapers toward the lobby. On the front page of the local edition, even from a distance, Leah could see Owen's old campaign photo above a headline too large to mistake. She did not go closer. She walked back toward the ED with a strange sensation in her chest. Not relief, not grief, something closer to irreversible motion. Tasha intercepted her at the station again, because apparently this was now the rhythm of the day. ICU called, she said. He's more alert. They want to know if you're coming before the detectives do. Leah looked toward the ceiling as though she might see through 2 floors of tile and ductwork. More alert meant more coherent. More coherent meant statements, choices, denials, maybe names. It also meant a final chance to look at him before the legal machinery sealed him inside roles with official titles. Victim, suspect, cooperating witness, defendant. Husband would become the least useful of them. I'm going, she said. Tasha nodded. Then go now. I'll cover your board for 20. Leah turned toward the stairwell instead of the elevator. Again, the body needed effort with resistance. As she climbed, each step seemed to strip one layer of hospital noise away. The shouted triage questions receded first, then the rolling gurney wheels, then the phones. By the time she reached the ICU floor, all that remained was the contained machinery of prolonged survival. Marisol met her at room 12. He asked for water, his lawyer, and you, she said. In that order. Leah almost smiled. Consistent priorities. Marisol's expression did not shift. Pain's better. Orientation's improved. Detective Bureau's outside. She touched Leah's arm lightly. Whatever this is, keep it brief. He's still tenuous. Leah nodded and stepped inside. Owen was awake, not merely blinking through medication. Awake in the unforgiving way, sick people became once drugs receded enough to return them to the body they had to inhabit. He looked smaller than he had 8 hours earlier, as if pain had edited him down to truer proportions. His eyes found hers immediately. This time there was no morphine blur to soften the intelligence in them. Just exhaustion, fear, and something like resignation settling in behind both. The television in the corner was on mute. A local reporter stood outside the courthouse under bright morning light, her mouth forming urgent shapes around his public collapse. Owen noticed Leah glance at the screen and turned his head away. "Did Noah come home?" he asked. Leah moved to the side of the bed but stayed standing. "He's landing this morning. He knows enough." Owen shut his eyes briefly. "I'm sorry." That phrase is losing value. He accepted that with a tiny movement of the mouth that might once have become a smile in easier times. "The Bureau came?" "Yes. And you talked." "Not accusation. Recognition." Leah met his gaze. "Yes." Something in his face loosened. Not relief. More like the last support giving way beneath denial. "Good," he said. The word startled her. "Good?" He wet his lips. "Because if I ask you not to, I become worse than I already am." Leah looked at him for a long moment, trying to determine whether this was integrity finally arriving too late or strategy wearing a cleaner suit. Before she could decide, he drew a shallow breath and said, "There's one thing I didn't tell Carla." Outside the room, she could see the shape of 2 detectives waiting through the glass. Morning had arrived completely now. Light lay flat across the ICU floor, pale and pitiless, and Leah understood with total certainty that whatever he said next would move them past preparation and into the final damage. Leah did not sit. Sitting would imply time. There was no time left in the shape they had been living. "Then say it now," she said. Owen shifted fractionally against the pillows, and pain moved visibly through him. A tightening around the eyes, a careful shallowing of breath as if his body had become a minefield, and he was trying not to step wrong inside it. The monitor above him climbed 6 beats and held. "Dana set up a timed release," he said. "Not just to the Bureau, to Noah." For a second, Leah did not understand the sentence. It arrived in pieces, syntactically clear and emotionally impossible. "What?" Owen looked at the ceiling before he looked back at her, as if he could not bring himself to watch the impact land. She got his email from an old campaign family contact sheet. "Last night, before Miller Road, she told me, if anything happened to either of us, the file package would go out automatically, to state investigators, 2 reporters, and Noah." Leah felt every muscle in her body go rigid at once. "You knew this and let him get on a plane." "I didn't know if she'd already triggered it." "You said nothing." Her voice stayed low, which made it more dangerous. "I was trying to stay alive." He did not say it defensively. He said it with the blunt helplessness of a man who knew it was both explanation and indictment. Leah stared at him and understood, again, that survival did not improve character. It only lengthened the period in which character had to answer for itself. "What's in the package?" she asked. Owen hesitated. That hesitation told her as much as content would. "Ledgers, emails, audio files. There's video from my office. Dana copied more than I knew." "Of what?" "Me, Denise, Commissioner Hall, Judge Eberly once, maybe twice." He swallowed and winced, enough to blow open every lie I told myself about keeping things contained. Leah felt the room narrow. Commissioner Hall, whose campaign signs lined half the county roads every election cycle. Judge Eberly, who shook hands after church and sent thank you notes in blue ink. Familiar public faces, now joined in her mind to storage boxes, burner phones, and wet gravel on Miller Road. "And Noah gets this because Dana thought blackmailing your son was strategically elegant?" Owen shut his eyes. "She thought he wouldn't bury it for me." That stung because it was true in precisely the direction that hurt most. Noah, who had already seen through the house better than either parent admitted. Noah, who would not protect his father out of habit because he had never learned the habit quite as completely as Leah had. She reached for her phone as the realization sharpened into urgency. When was it supposed to send? "Midnight, I think. Maybe midnight 10? I don't know if it failed." Leah was already texting Noah. "Do not open any message from unknown sender. Do not forward anything. Do not delete anything. Reply now." No response. Of course, in the air, taxiing, landing. Somewhere between Chicago and Georgia, with a device in airplane mode and a bomb waiting in the inbox. Leah looked toward the detectives outside the glass. Then back at Owen. "Why tell me now instead of them? Because if they call him cold, he panics or gets righteous." Owen's mouth twisted slightly on the last word. If you call, he listens long enough to hate me accurately. Leah almost laughed at the grotesque precision of that. Instead, she said, you do not get to manage this through me anymore. He looked at her with a kind of ruined steadiness. I know. I'm asking anyway. The door opened before she could answer. Marisol stepped in with the two detectives behind her. Both men in shirt sleeves now, jackets off, badges at their belts, the look of professionals arriving at the exact point. Human privacy became an obstacle to process. One was local, Detective Bureau. The other, Leah, recognized from the administrative wing with Kessler. State again. Marisol gave Leah an apologetic glance. Time. Leah nodded once and stepped back from the bed. Owen's eyes followed her as if trying to hold on to something already lost. She left the room without touching him and called Noah the second the ICU doors shut behind her, straight to voicemail. She called again. Same. She texted Beth next, terse and practical for once. Need you at Marriott off I-75 near airport. Noah arriving. Stay with him until I get there. Don't tell press anything. Beth replied within seconds. On my way. Leah exhaled once and turned toward the elevators, just as Carla came striding down the hall with a paper cup in one hand, and exhaustion cut into the lines around her mouth. She took one look at Leah's face and knew something had shifted. What? Leah gave it to her without preamble. Dana's timed release. Noah. The file package. Carla swore under her breath, low and inventive. Can you trace whether it's sent? Leah asked. Not from the hallway, but I can have cyber check if we know the sender account. Dana used at least 3 campaign addresses and probably burners. Carla nodded sharply, already thinking ahead. Then assume it's sent. Is Noah on the ground? Landing this morning. Not answering yet. Carla glanced toward ICU room 12, where the detectives were now visible as silhouettes through half-drawn blinds. Did Owen tell them? Not yet. Then I need to know whether you want me hearing this from you or from an evidence technician after the fact. There were versions of trust and all of them were ugly now. Leah made the choice quickly because delay had become indistinguishable from complicity. From me, Dana scheduled a dead man's package to investigators, press, and my son. Owen knew. He told me 30 seconds before your people walked in. Carla's jaw flexed. Not surprise. Anger with nowhere clean to go. I'll flag airport units in case press gets there first. No visible police, Leah said immediately. If Noah sees uniforms before me, he'll think he's about to be arrested for receiving an email. Carla considered, then nodded. Plain clothes only. Leah started toward the elevator. Carla caught her sleeve lightly. Leah. If Noah has the files, he is now a material witness at minimum. Tell him not to touch metadata, not to open attachments if he hasn't already, and not to hand that phone to anyone but me, Kessler, or Bureau Tech in your presence. Leah filed it. Evidence handling layered over motherhood. Of course, that was the shape of the day. Understood. The drive to the Marriott felt unreal in the way mornings after no sleep often did. Every surface overdefined and somehow distant. The county had fully entered day. School buses hissed at curbs. A landscaping trailer rattled behind a pickup on the frontage road. The radio in Leah's car stayed off, but every billboard and stoplight seemed to vibrate with the knowledge that her life had entered public circulation before breakfast. Outside the courthouse downtown, she passed 2 more news vans and a freelance camera operator adjusting a tripod. At the 3rd red light, she checked her phone again. Still no Noah. Beth texted, at hotel lobby. No sign of him yet. Leah gripped the steering wheel until her fingers ached. Her body had crossed the line into that strange post-adrenaline competence, where fatigue no longer felt like tiredness, but like a second skin, heavy and electrically thin at the same time. She could smell the stale coffee in her own car, the faint medicinal scent embedded in her scrub top, the hot vinyl heating under the early sun. Mercy County spread around her in low commercial strips and church signs and damp spring fields beyond the exits. An ordinary American county carrying extraordinary amounts of concealed filth behind courthouse doors and campaign mailers. The Marriott lobby was all synthetic calm. Lemon water on a side table, industrial carpet, a gas fireplace turned off for the season, 2 businessmen checking out while pretending not to notice the television over the breakfast area tuned to local news. Owen's face was on screen beside Dana's yearbook bright headshot, and a red breaking banner. Beth stood near the elevators in jeans and a rain jacket, arms crossed, fury radiating off her in visible waves. She was 3 years older than Leah and had spent most of adulthood in Tampa, selling commercial insurance and making her opinions an event. When she saw Leah, her face softened for less than a second before returning to battle readiness. He's upstairs, she said. Room 614. He got here 20 minutes ago. He looks like hell. Good, Leah said. and Beth actually barked a short laugh. That's the first useful thing anybody's said all morning. They rode up together in silence until Beth said, "Do you want me in the room?" Leah thought about Noah's face at 12 when he'd first started guarding parts of himself from the family, about the way witnesses changed when too many adults were present. For the first minute. Then no. Beth nodded. In room 614, Noah opened the door before Leah could knock twice. He wore yesterday's sweatshirt, wrinkled from travel, and the fatigue under his eyes made him suddenly look both older and much younger. He had Owen's jaw and Leah's eyes, which at moments like this felt less like lineage than a territorial dispute. Beth stepped in first, hugged him hard, then kissed Leah's temple on the way out and said, "I'll be down the hall if either of you needs bail money or homicide advice." The door shut. Mother and son stood facing each other in a beige hotel room that smelled faintly of industrial detergent and the untouched breakfast sandwich cooling on the dresser. Noah held his phone in one hand. That hand told Leah everything before he spoke. Too careful. Too still. "It came through at 12:06, he said, from Dana. Leah crossed the room slowly, every instinct in her split between grabbing the device and keeping the last few feet of air between them intact. "Did you open it?" "The email? Not the attachments." He swallowed. "I read the first paragraph." "What did it say?" Noah looked at the phone, then at her. "It said, if I was reading it, one of two things had happened. Either my father had finally decided to cooperate, or somebody had decided my father knew too much to live." Leah closed her eyes for one beat. "Anything else?" "It said she was sorry for using me, but that I was the only person she believed wouldn't sell the files back to him." Leah let that sit between them, because there was no answer that wouldn't sound like commentary on her own failures. Noah extended the phone toward her. "Is this evidence now?" The question was flat, but underneath it she heard something worse than panic. The beginning of moral contamination. A young man trying to determine whether receiving the truth had already made him part of the machinery that produced it. Leah took the phone carefully by the edges, as Carla instructed, and set it face up on the desk, without touching the screen. "Yes," she said. "And you did the right thing by stopping." Noah shoved both hands into his sweatshirt pockets and paced once toward the window. Outside, cars slid through the hotel lot under clean morning light. "So now what?" "I hand over a phone and watch Dad become a headline." Leah kept her voice level. "Now you decide whether you want to hear the worst of it from me before the state does." He stopped pacing. "I want the truth, not the version that protects him, and not the version that protects you from protecting him. The precision of that hurt, because it was earned." Leah nodded. "Your father admitted the affair. He admitted moving money through discretionary accounts, not alone, and not cleanly. He says he didn't shoot Dana. I do not know if that's true. There is evidence he was central to a corruption network that reaches beyond his office. Dana copied records. Denise Talbot stored them. State Bureau is now in our house or will be soon because I consented." Noah's face altered in stages. Shock first, then the grim settling of pieces into a pattern he had feared and perhaps already partly guessed. "You consented?" "Yes." "Good." That one word should not have landed as relief. It did. Noah looked at the untouched breakfast sandwich, then away as if the sight of ordinary food under fluorescent hotel light was suddenly obscene. "I used to think adults hit some age where they could tell the difference between compromise and rot," he said. "Now it just looks like rot wears a tie longer." Leah almost said something parental about cynicism. Instead, she let the truth of his sentence stand. "Maybe that's the lesson," she said. "Maybe the tie is part of it." He gave her a brief, bleak glance. "Are you divorcing him?" No preface. No apology. She looked at the phone on the desk, at Dana's name on the screen, at the object through which a dead woman had entered their family one last time. "I don't know what legal paperwork I'll file first," she said. "I do know the marriage, as I understood it, is over." Noah nodded once. His jaw tightened, then loosened. "Okay." Not approval, not comfort, simple acceptance of the new map. Leah took out her own phone and called Carla on speaker so Noah could hear the chain of custody being built around his life. Carla answered immediately. Leah stated the facts, the room number, the unopened attachments, the visible sender line. Carla said a plainclothes tech team was 10 minutes out and instructed Noah not to interact with the device. He agreed in a voice so controlled, Leah recognized he was holding himself together by force. After the call ended, there were 7 long minutes before anyone arrived. 7 minutes in which there was nothing procedural to do. Leah sat on the desk chair. Noah stayed by the window. At last, he said, without turning around, "When did you start not knowing him?" The question moved through her slowly, because its answer was not a date. It was an accumulation. "I think I knew less than I believed for longer than I can stand to admit," she said. "But I started feeling it last year. More distance. More explanation than information. More pieces that only made sense if I refused to line them up. Noah touched the curtain with 2 fingers, not looking at her. I used to think you were the one person in that house who didn't lie. Leah took that, and did not defend herself. I may not have lied out loud, she said. But I participated in things staying blurry. That's its own version. He turned then, and the hurt in his face was so clean it stripped the room of everything else. I don't know what to do with that. Neither do I. The honesty of it seemed to reach him more than any attempted wisdom would have. He came away from the window and sat on the edge of the other bed, elbows on knees, hands clasped. For a second, Leah saw the exhausted little boy beneath the graduate student, the son who used to sit like that while waiting for test results or punishment or permission to cry. Is he dying? Noah asked. Not this morning. That's not what I asked. Leah looked at her son and heard the ICU monitor in memory, the drain bulb, the fragile numbers. I don't know, she said. He could live. He could go to prison. He could do both. A knock came at the door. Not loud. Not tentative. Plainclothes. Leah stood and opened it to Carla, Kessler, and a young tech with gloved hands and a hard case. Carla's eyes went first to Noah, softening by a degree. Mr. Mercer. Noah's shoulders tensed at the surname, but he nodded. What followed was clean procedure. Photos of the phone in place, sender line documented, Noah verbally confirming he had opened the email body but no attachments, consent forms, evidence bag. The tech, moving with careful efficiency, plugging the device into a shielded extractor instead of touching the screen further. Kessler asking whether Noah had forwarded the message. No. Whether anyone else had access to his account. No. Whether he recalled exact wording beyond the first paragraph. Partially. Leah watched her son become, in real time, a witness statement. It was not violent, exactly. But it was an extraction of innocence all the same. When they finished, Carla lingered while Kessler and the tech stepped into the hall. There's something else, she said quietly. The first reporter package already hit. One outlet's holding the files for verification, but another posted excerpts 20 minutes ago. Hall's office is denying everything. Eberly just called it fabricated political sabotage. Denise requested counsel and started naming names the second she saw the leak. This is rolling downhill fast. Noah let out a breath that was almost a laugh. So the county gets to eat itself on live TV. Carla did not disagree. She looked at Leah. I also need to tell you Owen's being moved under guard as soon as ICU clears it. Not formal arrest yet. Protective custody status until charging decision. Leah nodded. There it was. The transition from husband in a hospital bed to state-handled body. Necessary. Still brutal. Carla hesitated, then added. He asked whether Noah would come. Noah's face closed immediately. Not anger. Defense. Leah answered before the silence hardened further. He won't. Not today. Carla accepted that and left them with the residual quiet of hotel HVAC and traffic 6 floors below. Noon approached in small mechanical signs, brighter light at the curtains, housekeepers' carts rattling down the corridor, an ice machine cycling somewhere nearby. Leah stood in the center of the room, emptied out and overfull at once, while Noah sat on the bed looking at his now absent phone's rectangle in memory on the desk. What happens to us, he said finally, when the story people tell about our family is the true one? Leah looked at him. This, she understood, was the real aftermath question. Not charges, not headlines. Identity after public fact. Then we stop spending energy defending the false one, she said, and we see what survives. It was not comfort. He knew that. But he nodded, and after a long moment, he stood and came toward her. They did not hug dramatically. No cinematic collapse. He simply leaned his forehead briefly against her shoulder, the way he had not done in years, and she put one hand on the back of his head and held there long enough to feel how much of him she could still recognize without needing translation. Outside, somewhere beyond the hotel glass and courthouse cameras and ICU doors and evidence lockers, Mercy County kept moving into afternoon. Owen would wake again into pain and questioning. Denise would bargain. Hall and Eberly would deny, until denial became impossible. Dana Whitaker would remain dead, which meant no explanation anyone offered would restore proportion to what had already been taken. By evening, there would be more names, more files, more neighbors pretending not to stare. By next week, there would be motions, commentators, campaign obituaries, and the first ugly practical calculations about mortgages, legal fees, and which possessions in Leah's house had been purchased with poisoned money. No clean solution. No moral accounting neat enough to fit the losses. But in the hotel room, under flat noon light, with her son's weight briefly against her, and the last viable fiction burned away, Leah felt something that was not peace and not hope, only a harsher, narrower thing, the beginning of a life no longer organized around managing another person's darkness. That evening, after Noah slept for 3 hours fully dressed on top of the hotel blanket, and Beth arrived with takeout they barely touched, Leah drove back to Mercy County General for the night shift she had agreed to cover, because the department was short and people still came in shot, breathless, frightened, and waiting to be told whether the worst had already happened. She parked under the same sodium lights, walked through the same sliding doors, and past the waiting room television, where Owen's face appeared again above a scrolling banner about indictments expected within 48 hours. No one stopped her. No one said they were sorry. The hospital simply opened and took her back. In room 5, a man with chest pain waited with his hand pressed to the center of his shirt, afraid in the plain, honest way she now trusted more than any polished reassurance. Leah stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and said, "Tell me where it hurts."